welcome to today's episode on the Moving from Fear to Trust series. Today I'm joined by Satu Ahlman of Saga Performance. Satu works with data and behavior. She uses genetic testing, stress and sleep analysis, and she helps people with behavior modifications to achieve sustainable high performance. So I'm so excited to speak with you today, Satu, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Aisling. I'm so happy to be here. I'm a really big fan of your work and your podcast. So finally, we get to meet in this context. So I'm looking forward to our chat now.
Yeah. So tell me, how did you get into this work? Because it's certainly not like something that I would have heard about, say, from school. You know, it's a different kind of world, all to do with like high performance and being able to really optimize everything, like what you were saying, like before we started recording. It's like that whole systems approach. So
yeah.
How did you get into this work? Like, what was your journey like?
Yeah, quite random actually, because if I look back, I studied business. So that wasn't really a choice that this is what I want to do and this was my plan. But one thing led to another. I've been traveling and working abroad a lot. My career has been mostly people development, working with leaders, executives, leadership development programs internationally. And along the journey, I've always been curious about wellness. I've been doing a lot of sports myself. I love CrossFit, for instance. I tend to think that I've lived a pretty healthy life for the past 10, 50 years at least. And I've had some issues with my own health in the past, with stomach problems and so on, that were difficult to solve. And being a high performing business professional, as I see myself being, I wanted to solve this thing. And I started just like learning, educating myself. And one thing led to another, like all the learnings that I got from the past during my career and the studies that I've done just made me more of a broad thinker, a systems approach type of a thinker. And then actually I just randomly found DNA testing, probably an ad online or something. And I did that. I did the heritage DNA testing or genetic testing, and I found it very fascinating. And I was like, okay, how can I work with this more? There must be more to it, more data that I can analyze for me to perform and live a better and healthier life. And then I actually found this institute that then I studied with, Appear and Zoe, that trained me to do genetic interpretations and epigenetic performance coaching. An incredible journey. I've met so many fascinating people, a lot of doctors that have helped me throughout this journey. And their approach is also a systems approach, a holistic way of looking at human being and life and performance.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, I've done the epigenetics performance coaching certification, and I've combined this with my career, the 15 years working with people development and leadership and behavioral change, and then added more studying in terms of stress and sleep analysis that I can now add to the portfolio and really help people to see what are the pieces of the puzzle that they're missing, that are making them still lacking in their performance, or feeling like I can't really thrive or be at the top where I want to be in a sustainable manner. So now finally I get to help all sorts of individuals with all these tools and really science-based data. It's really incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Hope that answered your question.
Oh yeah, totally. But it's like, I think, in terms of like being able to like develop trust within yourself, and that's like the whole theme that we explore here in the podcast.
Right.
And it's like, in order to do that, it's not something that necessarily just comes to you from just a thought. It's like, it's actually how you're living and like how you're showing up, and the different practices that you're putting in place, like as a discipline for you to actually develop that within yourself. It's not something that is just automatically present. It's not something you have to cultivate.
Exactly. Yeah. Like one thing leads to another, and you really need to stop and think and analyze, what is it that I'm doing at the moment? How am I living my life? What are the pieces of the puzzle that I have currently, and what is possibly missing? And where do I find those pieces, and so on? It's a step-by-step process.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think like especially now more than ever, like in the current climate with what's happening, people's stress levels are obviously at a higher level
Mm,
than normal.
yeah.
And I think, things like sleep, I think that's like really essential. And, we were part of the International Women's Day.
Yeah.
We did a pop-up for like celebrating, and, you were sharing all about like the different routines, especially like I think the nighttime routine, which is something
Hmm.
that sometimes we're not really aware of that. It's like, yeah, in general, I think people are more aware of the morning routine,
Yeah, I think
whereas
so
I think
too.
the evening routine doesn't get as much attention.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
I'd love you to share, like, what are your kind of strategies around that, and just kind of giving people some like practical starting points.
Yeah, yeah, with pleasure. I think what has happened, like the recent years or even 50 years or more, is that our lifestyles have become much more evening focused. And that is also the online and internet and even TV, all those developments that have happened throughout our lifetime doesn't really, it's nice to have, but it doesn't really help our sleep. It doesn't really support our recovery, because
Hmm.
what happens is that all this artificial light that we look at and see and what is surrounding us throughout the day, but especially in the evening, is actually doing us more harm than good, because that blue artificial light is blocking our melatonin production. And as we probably all of you know, melatonin is needed for sleep.
Hmm.
And if we don't get that good night's sleep, we know that we are not as resilient, we're not able to perform at our best, and even the stress feels much more like stress than it maybe even should be.
Hmm.
So what can we do? Just basically a very concrete task is remind yourself 2-3 hours before you're supposed to go to bed that this is the time to start switching off
Hmm.
and really calming down. And what to do? Well, first of all, you should avoid those devices. Like if you want to watch TV, I understand. If you want to do emails, I don't understand. So basically,
Get off the emails after a certain time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and also, yeah, just scrolling the Instagram or looking at your laptop, that is still blue light.
Hmm.
And if you want to block that, you have filters that you can actually download to your laptop and even iPhone. And another option is that you would have a pair of blue light blocking eyeglasses that you can have to minimize the effect of the blue light and
Hmm.
maximize the possibility for you to actually start calming down.
Hmm.
But in the best world or best scenario, you would actually be avoiding that light 2 hours before you go to bed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's one part of it.
Yeah.
Another part of it is, of course, what you eat and what you do during those 2 hours, 3 hours. So
Mhm.
I would advise don't eat 2-3 hours before anymore. So have your dinner and then have a couple of hours resting, relaxing, do something else, meditate, yoga, relax, whatever calms you down,
Hmm.
so that you can have the best possible rest during the night.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's something that is like really important for people to understand, I feel, in terms of like what you're talking about, high performance, is like the value of rest and recovery. And that's something
Mm-hmm.
that in general we don't tend to value because we see it as maybe lazy, or, like that we
Yeah.
should be constantly doing
Yeah.
to get ahead. And, so I'd love you to talk about that, like just how important the value of rest and recovery actually is for high performance.
Yeah, absolutely. My slogan is redesigning high performance. And why that is so important for me is exactly what you said. Like people tend to see high performance as something like you have to execute all the time. You have to be
Hmm.
in action 24/7, 150%. And that's really not high performance. High performance for me and for my clients is really finding the optimal, stable path that you can still hit your targets and goals and learn and develop, but not sacrifice your health. Because
Yeah.
if you would just go on and on and on, at some points, you're probably going to hit the wall. You're just going to get tired physically or mentally.
Hmm.
And it is so important for anyone who actually wants to be a high performer is to find your way of recovery. your way of balancing your lifestyle and your way of maximizing resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
And their sleep plays, of course, a crucial role, but also the daytime stressors and balancing that out. Like, when do you rest during the day? What kind of activities can you do that actually give you energy and
Mm-hmm.
not just take energy from you? If you have a very demanding job, how do you pace your day so that you still get some restful moments?
Mm-hmm.
And there, what I do with my clients, we have data that we look into. We look into how your heart rate functions throughout the day and night, how your heart rate varies. Great data source actually is what I recommend to everyone is the heart rate variation, heart
Mm-hmm.
rate variability, to see how the stress or the lifestyle that you have affects your heart. Because a
Okay.
healthy heart should be irregular. It should not be just beating like this. So
Mm-hmm.
there are tools that you can have to measure this day and night that give you every morning an indication. Are you ready? Have you recovered? What is your
Mm.
stress level? So there's so much data out there. You just need to know how to work around it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I definitely recommend to start with recovery resiliency.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And in terms of like, if people were interested in that tool, is that something that, you can do on your own, or is that something that you have to do, say, with guidance? Like, could you, like, as you're saying, like the heart rate variability, like what's the easy way to start tracking that if somebody was
Yeah,
interested?
yeah. A very easy way, if you want to buy a tracker that doesn't cost, well, it does cost, but it doesn't cost too much, I would say, maybe less than 300 euros, is this kind of a ring, Aura ring.
Okay.
And this is, I'm a big fan of that. It's not that I'm part of their business in any way, but I recommend this to all my clients because this is also science-based, a very accurate tracker for HRV. And it gives you feedback on your sleep,
Mm-hmm.
how you recovered. Every morning it's connected to an app, and you get this kind of a feedback or summary of your sleep quality, quantity, and also your readiness and how you recovered. So based on that data and the feedback that you get, you can then plan your day.
That's
So I think
amazing.
this is amazing, yeah, because you don't need to have any external coach or advisor to help you with that. It's just the ring and the app. So
And it gives you like a little readout so you can get to know like your own patterning and what's happening for
yes,
you.
exactly. Yeah,
That's amazing. I'm
yeah.
sure, do a lot of athletes use that, for like, is that popular like in the sport world?
Yeah, I would say so. That there are, I think many athletes use watches and other types of data sources, but I would say quite many athletes use Aura Ring as well, mostly because it's so accurate and there's a lot of good science and research backing it up. But others use a lot of like Garmin watches, Polar, and so on, which are also good
Mm-hmm.
to a certain extent, I would say.
Yeah.
A lot of my clients use something called the First Beat, which is a lifestyle assessment tool, which is more of you do a 3 to 5 day study. You plug in the ECG type of a device to measure your heart rate variability
Mm-hmm.
and your recovery and your stressors and your sleep. And then you get a report out of those 5 days or 3 days and nights. And then we look at that to give you an overview. Okay, this is typically how you recover, and then
Mm-hmm.
we create a plan. So it's a little bit different from the Aura Ring, but I would say I like to use both because
Yeah.
there you get so much interesting data that you can really then start having an individual approach to that specific person's performance and
Mm-hmm.
really make lifestyle changes based on that.
I love that
Yeah.
because it's very much like you really like, I think all these tools that you're working with are really like bringing people's like self-awareness up to a much higher level. So it's
Yes.
like you're becoming conscious of all the different nuances of your being.
Yeah, and you can stop guessing. Of course, you always need to trust your own feeling and you need to ask yourself, how am I feeling today? And that is very important. But doing like taking decisions based on your feeling, I wouldn't advise to do that in the long run, because if you have data, use the data and then match it with how you're feeling. Much more reliable.
Yeah.
Obviously. And the same goes with, I would say, nutrition and all sorts of decisions that you make. You can track quite a lot. And also genetics. I mentioned I'm an epigenetics performance coach. What I like to look is, how does your lifestyle affect your genes and your genetics? Because every one of us is unique to a certain extent. And the way we eat, sleep, stress has an impact on our genes. And once you know that, and once you understand what is your genetic blueprint, you can really start optimizing your diet, your way of living, your whatever choices you make in your life.
And do you find when people understand the data on themselves that gives them more motivation to make those changes?
Yes, I would say so. I think the reliability factor plays quite a big role, because once you are actually faced with this is me on a piece of paper, you can't really hide and say no, that's not true, because it is facts. It's much more easier if you just talk with someone and ask, how are you feeling? You could get different answer today than tomorrow, and so on. But once you start looking into the blueprints and so on, then you're kind of like, wow, okay, I think I really have to do something, because the data says and shows that I'm not feeling good. And my feeling confirms that. So I better act on it.
Yeah. And do you ever find like resistance in people for like making changes, or, you know, like in terms of when they're in that kind of high performance mindset? Because I find there's so much conditioning around like constantly doing and constantly, you know, performing, that like, does that show up in your practice with like just resistance to putting in, like, I don't know, modifications with rest and maybe putting in more exercise and, you know, like things that you feel are taking away from your time of doing work?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think many times what happens is that people are super motivated when they start, whatever it is they start with, whether it's exercise or a new diet or whatever. And then once you're over that honeymoon period of maybe it's just for 1 week or a couple of weeks, and then you're like, oh, but now I feel stressed again. And now there's so much work and so many other things. I might just go back to my old habits. It's much more easier. No one is challenging me or whatever. And that's when you need those feedback loops and someone to remind you and someone to support you, really to also show this is what the data shows. You're already going the right way. Let's find the motivators for you. But yes, you're absolutely right. That happens for any one of us, I think, because we're not ready for change. Change is really hard for most of us when it comes to like changing ourselves.
Yeah. And why do you, what, like, do you see, like, what's the issue with change? Like, because I know that's something I see a lot in my own practice, is like, you know, that honeymoon period.
Yeah,
People are all like gung ho and, yeah, I can't wait to do all this. And then it's like, then it kind of hits the wall and that honeymoon period fizzles away.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
you're kind of like left with, yeah, just feeling like, oh, I don't, it's too much work. It's too hard.
yeah,
But do I have to do it? You know, like, oh, that comes up. So I'd love to hear your perspective
exactly.
on that, like that resistance to change and actually breaking through that.
Yeah, yeah. Underlying issue is fear, because that is really the voice in our heads that is saying, stop, don't do that. It's much more comfortable in this box than outside the box, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes it's just so strong, the feeling of fear, that we might not even know or recognize it's fear. It's just this kind of a feeling, the stubbornness that kicks in and stops our new behavior. And I do think that some people have it easier to break through and some have it much harder. But what can you do to support yourself is short-term goals, short-term wins, like smaller steps. Don't think in huge blocks. Like today I'm here, 6 months I'm going to be there. Okay, great. That could be the overall goal. But what does it mean in on weekly basis? What does it mean in terms of your nutrition, for instance, or sleep, or evening routines? Maybe it's just a one simple thing like don't look at your emails during this week in the evening, 2 hours before you go to bed, and then evaluate on Friday. How did that go? What went well? What should I improve for next week?
Mm-hmm.
So self-coaching and feedback loops are super important short term
Mm-hmm.
to push through that, because that will come and that will happen